everybody, and welcome. Thank you for coming. As many of you probably know, Maria fell. She was in South Jersey, and she broke her shoulder. So, and you know that is the only thing that could keep her from being here, because she's been here. I've seen her with fever. I've seen her with stomach ailments. She's still up here. It would take the hospital, being in the hospital, for her not to be here with you today. But she sends her wishes, and she is very sorry that she can't be with all of you today. So, but we're going to carry on in Maria tradition. And we're going to start with one of her good friends, M.L. Liebler, who is the author of 13 books, including Wide Awake and Someone Else's Dream. I love that title. That's 2008, which won both the Paterson Poetry Prize for Literary Excellence and the American Indie Book Award for 2009. Liebler is the founding director of both the National Writers' Voice Project in Detroit and the Spring-Fed Arts, Metro Detroit Writers Literary Arts Organization. In 2010, he received the Barnes & Noble's Writer for Writers Award from Poets and Writers, and that's an award that Maria won the year after him. So he's in good company. Okay, and he's going to do, I think we're in for a treat, because he's going to do with his friend, Steve King. They're going to do some combination of poetry and music, so I think we're in for a good time. Okay, so thanks. ML, take it away.
Thank you. I'll tell you what's going to happen here. Kind of interesting to do it this way. I might have to stand. I don't really need this anyway, do I? I will. I mean, I'll use it, but I'll stand here. I'll try to. I just want to. This isn't a Grateful Dead concert, so this will not go until 4. And I may mostly say it for our other BJ and Lewis Jenkins, our poets, who are going to read. I'm just doing this because I really came here to hear them. And we're going to do just a few pieces. Now, you may not know how we do this, and it was like Susan was asking me, oh, so you're doing music? Well, yeah, sort of, not really. You'll see hear it in a minute, and then you'll get it. One thing that I do is, a few things that I do. One thing I have always done, and actually, it's kind of good that Maria's not here, because Maria doesn't like this side of M.L. Liebler so much. She doesn't hate it, but she always says to me, would you just read? You don't have to have music. But you guys are probably a very sophisticated audience, but I started incorporating music and poetry together 30-some years ago because, as you probably are aware, most Americans do not read poetry, will not read poetry, or listen to it. And that's who I want to reach. So you're going to have to suffer through our 5 little pieces here in the way that we do it. But so that's the idea behind it. Now, I want to introduce this guy. I know he's a very unassuming looking fellow. I bought him a shirt yesterday, so no. He works cheap. But actually, I want you to know who he is he's a very talented musician. He is a Grammy Award-winning co-writer, producer, and engineer on most of the Eminem records. He comes out of Detroit, but don't worry, we're not going to... It's not that kind of thing. We're not doing that. Go ahead, give me a little taste of the... Here's what we were doing in the high school yesterday. Then I grabbed my crotch, start doing that. But that's only in the high school, so we're not going to do that. You know what that song is, don't you? Or if you don't, then who knows what that is? Eminem. Yeah, it's "Lose Yourself" from 8 Mile, which Steve is. I think that's what he won his Grammy for, actually. But anyway, so he's also. We are in a very, very good group of musicians in Detroit, a poetry band called the Coyote Monk Poetry Band, M.L. Liebler and Coyote Monk. And we're recording in the same M&M studios now, and Steve is producing and playing. He runs to guitar, he runs to the back, and so forth. So I'm going to start with sort of a little bit of tiding from Detroit, and then we're going to go into a couple of our pieces with some music. This is a participatory piece, and this is a song or poem written by a guy who is buried in Detroit, really kind of came through the Delta up to Rochester. We just played Rochester Tuesday night, Rochester, New York, and then ended up in Detroit, and his name was Sunhouse. So this is a Sunhouse piece, but you got to help me with it. So let's try this, everyone together. Tell me who's that riding John a Revelator? Who's that a riding John a Revelator? Who's that a riding John a Revelator? Wrote the book of the seven seals. Now God walked down on the cool day, called Adam by his name, but he refused to answer 'cause he was naked and ashamed. I said, who's that riding John a Revelator? Who's that a riding John a Revelator? Who's that a riding John a Revelator? Wrote the book of the seven seals. Now Christ had 12 apostles, and 3 he laid away. He said, watch over me for just 1 hour while I go over yonder and pray. I said, who's that riding John a Revelator? Who's that a riding John a Revelator? Who's that a riding John a Revelator? Wrote the book of the seven seals. He wrote the book of the seven seals. He wrote the book of the seven seals. He wrote the book of the seven seals. Thank you. Thank you. Good old Sunhouse. So this is a piece called Two Poems Together. Blood in the Moon. It's the first poem. The sequence is Blood in the Moon. First poem in it is The Undertow. Then we'll segue into the Blood in the Moon. So just to check, is the volume okay? Or is it too much? Okay. From the undertow, swirling blood of envy flowed, draining my body, pale and dry across the bone. Bone earth of death, bone earth of death. And I fascinated myself within the skin of myself, within the skin of my own desire. I stood alone, believing no one, understanding my future less and less, just a shadow against the moon, just a shadow against the moon's face, just a shadow against the moon's face, the moon's face, moon's face, moon's face. In my dreams, notions from the underbrush pump blue in my heart, with sassy talk from clovers, whispered at times. Climb school in the mud, climbs naked in my blood, an unknown rhythm that speaks a lead that shade the eyelids in the dancing night. All night long I can hear it, I can see it, I can feel it in the moon tonight. All night long I hear it pounding, pump, pump and pound. All night long I hear it pounding, pump, pump and pound. All night long I can hear it, see it, feel it, just about taste it. There's blood in that moon tonight. I'll see that moon above us here in the Hamilton Club on Church Street in downtown Paterson. When these clouds move away, I'll follow it back to Detroit, across the lake, past Chicago, and pick up the Mississippi River in western Illinois. Take it into St. Louis, take it into Memphis too. I'll ride it down to New Orleans, sweet New Orleans, under the same moon. I'll tell you, Mississippi mud, Mississippi blood, Mississippi mud, under the same moon above us here tonight. Here in Paterson in New Jersey, the same moon that shines all over this world. When I look up, I can see it, feel it, taste it, just about reach up there and touch it. There's blood in the moon tonight. All night long, Steve, I hear it. All night long, I can feel it. All night long, I can see it. Oh, Halloween orange up there, and it's glowing, glowing, glowing. Yeah, blood in the moon tonight. Yeah, blood in the moon tonight now. Blood in the moon tonight. Tonight's a night. Tonight's a night. Blood in the moon tonight. Blood in the moon. Blood in the moon. Thank you. So that's kind of how we do it, sort of. Now you see, Susan?
I see.
I do have a beret I could put on so I'd look like a person that does music and poetry. We told the kids at the high school that you can buy a beret for a poet in downtown Paterson and they stitch it to your head. That's how you know you're a poet. And then the kids said, well, we want that. Where do we get that? You know, it's kind of...
It's the new tattoo.
It's the new tattoo. So you might see kids walking around with berets sewn on their scalp. That's exactly it. Don't tell me about it. I don't want to hear what a bad influence... In fact, that's a poem. I'm going to read this little poem. I'm just going to say this poem. You know, it's like, say a poem, Larry Ferlinghetti. Say a poem. Here's a little poem. Kind of explains this, I guess, a bit. Short little 12-line poem. I think Maria's published it before somewhere. Called Rock and Roll. I've thought about the many nights of rock and roll I spent in my youth. Hardcore. My grandma taught me how to rock. She hummed Elvis while she hemmed my pants. She liked Elvis. She liked him so much that she bought me a black leather jacket and a motorcycle hat like Marlon Brando's. That really pissed Mrs. Taylor off. She kicked me out of the first grade. She said I'd be a bad influence on all the other kids. I didn't like those snotty-nosed kids anyway. They couldn't rock like Grandma. So this is another piece. This is called The Jazz. A little softer piece. This is for my poetry audience. Go ahead, Steve. Feel your way around that a little bit. This is for a good friend of mine. Several times we actually brought him to Paterson, New Jersey. He passed away last June. His name was Farouk Bey. Me and Robert Jones and Farouk used to come and do some school stuff. Susan knows that. So this was for Farouk. I wrote it many years ago. The touch is soft and meaningful and fast, just like the jazz. Uptown in sweat, uptown in tears, in hard driving notes that break our opportunities. And it's high, the jazz. Yes, it's high, the jazz. Can you dig what's happening here on a Saturday afternoon? With Louis Jenkins, B.J. Ward, we got the jazz, magic poetry, jazz. Oh, beat and polish, everything to the bone. So when this is over, when our day is over, let us say no words and just listen. Just listen to the jazz, the poetry, jazz. Listen to Steve strum a little bit of that jazz. So in America, when the sun goes down and I sit on the old broken down river pier, watching the long skies over New Jersey, and I sense all that raw land that rolls into one unbelievable huge bulge, all the way over to the West Coast, and all that road going, and all the people dreaming in the immensity of it. And in Iowa, I know by now the children must be crying in the land where they let the children cry. And tonight the stars will be out. Tonight the stars will be out over Duluth, Minnesota. So all that rain's coming this way. Over Duluth, Minnesota. And don't you know that God is Pooh Bear, God is Pooh Bear, God is Pooh Bear. And the evening star must be drooping and shedding her sparkler dim on the prairie, which is just before the coming of complete night that will bless the earth, darken all the river, cup the peaks and folds the final shore in, and nobody knows what's gonna happen to anybody besides the forlorn rags of growing old. I think of Dean Moriarty. I even think of an old Dean Moriarty, the father we never found. I think of Dean Moriarty. I think of Dean Moriarty. The jazz. Yeah, the jazz. Beats and polishes everything, every damn thing, everything. Right down to the bone, yes. So when this is over, all the poetry's over, let us say no words. Let us say no words and just listen. jazz, just listen. Just listen. Steve King. Thanks. Thank you. So we'll just do a couple more pieces here. I think maybe 2 is enough because I want to hear the poetry jazz. This actually, we've been doing a lot of these things, and we've been in schools through Susan. And, at gigs and at schools, people ask the question, how do you, write poems with the music? Do you write the music and then the poems, or the poems and then the music? And in my case, the poems are all written and published in books, and then later, through various means, they're brought to music. Either musicians like Steve will come to me, as you're going to hear in a minute, with music, or members of our group will, or sometimes I hear music in my head that I bring to the group, and then they translate it, thank God, and make it sound even better than what I heard in my head. As on our new CD, there's that kind of stuff. But this is one poem I actually did write many years ago with some percussion in it, but this is Steve's music. Steve, in addition to, being a musician and writing and everything, he's the guy that, in rap music, for example, you hear the melody, which is like the best part. That's him. So fortunately, he doesn't sleep very well. And when he doesn't, he creates loops like you're going to hear, and he sends them to me, and then I find appropriate poems, and this is the case with one of them. This is called Floating, and this is actually some of the music that Steve came up with. It's all right, we're used to that in Detroit. We fix it ourselves. So this is Floating, and Steve's loops. Eminem didn't get this one. They worked her into the mud. They beat her head into the tiles, into the workhouses. They slit her belly up and dressed her like a deer after the almighty hunt. Now I understand how my mother died. Now I understand how my mother died in the lie that surrounded her labor, her honest labor that boiled production, brought it all to a head for their profit, for her dead spirit. Drained the blood, no one to cover bones, no one to wipe her brow over her sunken eyes. So this how my mother died, this how my mother died. Honest work for honest pay, honest work for honest pay. This lie is white hot, this lie is white hot, but it won't burn forever, it won't burn forever. In her breast forever, ever, ever, ever. Now my mother flashes, flashes, flashes before my eyes, working her ass off to maintain her room, her little room. East side of Detroit in the projects, 1950s, just after my birth, just after my birth. Honest pay for honest work, honest pay for honest work. This lie can't live, this lie can't live forever, 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 forever. And when she died, and when her ADC check stopped, and when they didn't have to give her money, then they missed her labor, her cheap labor. Then they remembered her. Then they remembered her part in their lives. Then they remembered her part in their lives. Then they remembered her part in their lie. It keeps forever, forever, forever. Before my eyes she flashes, flashes, smolders in their kitchen, in their ovens, in her sweat and labor. It won't live, it lives, it won't live, it lives, it won't live, it won't live, it lives forever, it lives forever, it won't live. Floating. Thank you. Steve King. Thank you. And we'll just finish with this piece. This is another loop of Steve's that he had written that fits with a poem of mine that I used to do years ago. It's called Africa. I wrote this poem for Fela, which I was fortunate enough that Fela got a chance to be presented with it and read it and liked it in a rare Detroit visit. So this is Steve's music, and this is the poem Africa, and we'll finish. Thank you very much. A decision made when first I was a rhythm and sensation moving towards an unfocused destination. Somehow, some way I had to produce just so I could evaporate back into a raindrop left to hang from a bright green leaf, the size and texture of an elephant's ear. From the moss my soul oozed like a hydra dream, or more like an amoeba. It was chasing itself, circle within circle. I was once a heartbeat, buried deep in the bare mud. I was myself, pulsating and changing, convoluting and flowing, furrowing time in the same way that time cuts the river deep. I am the river, I am the river, I am the river, I am the river. In my whiteness, in my blackness, I was loved. I was once a heartbeat buried deep in the bare mud. I was myself, pulsating and changing, convoluting and flowing. I was furrowing time, same way that time cuts the river deep. I am the river, I am the river, I am the river, I am the river, I am the river. So there was a rhythm and sensation made when first I was. Rhythm and sensation, first I was. In Africa, we all come from Africa, the cradle of civilization. We all come, no matter what color our skin is. We come from Africa, Africa. I am the river, I am the river of Africa. I am the river, I am the river of Africa. Thank you. Old poem for Fela. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
So how is it going these days?
Everything's going swell. Been in Paterson for a few days. Did the Poets in the School with Steve King from the M&M Studios in Detroit. We've been doing some music and poetry shows, and we have been traveling around the country doing a bunch of gigs, and I've been traveling solo around the world to every place from Afghanistan to London, England. So everything's great. Good.
Great. Thank you, sir.